This is going to be the field stripping and reassembling of an M1 Garand. This is my 1956 Harrington Richardson. So the first step to field strip a M1 Garand is, of course, to make sure, when you work with any firearm, is to make sure it is unloaded. To do so, you take the operating rod, pull it to the rear until it locks back. You can see the magazine is empty and the chamber is empty. You could also do a physical check to make sure it's empty. Next, what you want to do is return the bolt to the forward position by grabbing the operating rod, depressing the follower, and allowing the bolt to come into battery. Flip the rifle over, grab the rear of the trigger guard, flip it up and forward, and remove the trigger group. Set that aside. Take the stock, lifting the butt end of the stock up and sliding it out. Set that aside. Then you have the basic receiver, the follower, bullet guide, follower arm, op rod catch, operating spring, and op rod, the gas cylinder, and the barrel. The next, what you want to do is remove the operating spring. So you grab the guide, pull it to the rear, and it will release from the follower arm. Pull it up and slide it out, and set that aside. Then, the next, what you want to do is take a bullet tip, and you see the pin, that is the head of the pin, so you cannot push it that way, but you see the other side, the pin coming through. Using the bullet tip, push the exposed end of the pin and grab the head of the pin and pull it out. Here's the pin. Set that aside and the bullet aside. Then you take your operating rod catch, remove it, and set that aside. Take the follower arm, set that aside. The bullet guide, set that aside. Then you can see inside the receiver is the follower. Just tip it and it'll slide out. That is the follower. To remove the operating rod, there is a small cutout in the receiver right there, and there's a tab on the operating rod that slides in the track on the receiver. So you pull the operating rod to the rear until the tab is in that cutout, and you work it back and forth until it pops out. Lift it out of the rifle and set it aside. Next is the bolt. You grab the bolt lug, pull it forward, up, and rotate it out. That is the bolt. Also, here's the gas plug, but I'm not going to take that off because this rifle's not been shot since the last time I've cleaned it, so I do not need to take that off. But if you took that off, that will allow you to clean the gas cylinder and make sure that is clear of any debris. And then to reassemble it, you would put the gas plug back in its place and make sure it's torqued down. Then flip the rifle over, take your operating rod or your bolt and put that in at an angle so that when you slide it back, the lugs will be in the track in the receiver. Make sure you have that in properly by sliding it back and forth. Then you take the bolt and return to the rear so that you could replace the operating rod. You do that by sliding the operating rod into the gas cylinder and taking the cam of the operating rod, lining it up with the bolt, and lining the tab in the operating rod up with the groove or the cutout in the receiver. Slide it back and forth to make sure you have it in properly. You push the operating rod all the way forward so the bolt is locked in place, and then you take your bullet guide, put it into place. Then you take your operating rod catch, slide it through the bullet guide and underneath the clip eject tab. If you get that in properly, it will be under spring tension or spring pressure, so it will, when you push it down, it will come back up on its own. That's how you know you have it in properly. Then you take your follower, put it back in the track, and allow it to drop to the bottom or hit the bolt. Then take your follower arm, slide it through the bullet guide into the follower. There's a track in the follower that the follower arm fits into. Then you take your pin from the side and push it through from the side with the operating rod and wiggle it so that everything lines up, and push it all the way through until it clicks into place. Then make sure the bolt is all the way to the forward, all the way to the front, and take your spring, slide it into the operating rod, compress it, and put it into the slot in the op rod catch, and make sure that it locks into place on the follower arm. If you have everything assembled correctly, when you pull the bolt to the rear, the spring will push the follower all the way up, and the op rod catch will drop and catch the operating rod, locking it to the rear. Most people don't understand that about the M1, and which gets them the M1 thumb. So the best way to prevent that is when you pull the bolt all the way to the rear, make sure you hear it click instead of just grabbing onto the follower. It'll be a quieter click, but you'll notice it. That means it's stuck on the follower instead of locked all the way to the rear. So if you get in that situation, the bolt will not be all the way to the rear. As you can see, the front of the bolt is sticking out the receiver, and you can see it. If it is properly locked to the back, it will be a much louder click, and when you release the bolt, it will be caught. And then you can see the bolt is not sticking out the front of the receiver, so you will not see it. And that way, when you depress the follower, it will not come forward and smash your thumb. The next step would be to flip the rifle over, take your stock, push it all the way until it stops, and then drop it into place. Take your trigger group, line it up with the receiver, work it down, and lock the trigger guard into place. That is a field strip and reassembled M1 Garand. Now, the proper way to release the bolt, or the best way I have learned, is use your hand like you're going to shake somebody's hand, put the back of your hand against the operating rod, push it to the rear until it releases from the catch, depress the follower, and allow the bolt to come home. That way, your thumb will not be caught or smashed by the bolt, and will probably save your thumbnail from falling off and a lot of blood and pain. So that is how you strip and reassemble the M1 Garand. Now you can take the rifle off safety and check it for function. Thank you.